Well, Africa's biggest gorilla is being poached and pushed out of its habitat in northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The plummeting population of the so-called Grauer gorilla has prompted a number of conservationists and their NGOs to call for this great ape to be designated as critically endangered in hopes of protecting the ones still left. VOA's senior investigative analyst Jeffrey Young reports.
Grauer's gorillas once ruled the jungles of Central Africa. Now, as their numbers dwindle to some 3,800, a 77% drop in the past 20 years, the huge primates are struggling to survive. Standing an average 1.7 meters tall and 163 kilograms, the Grauers, or eastern lowland gorilla, is the largest of the 4 gorilla subspecies. Their natural habitat is the eastern Democratic Republic of Congo's Kahuzi-Biega and Maiko national parks. What threatens their extinction is detailed by Wildlife Conservation Society's Joe Walston.
The main threat to Grauer's gorillas has been the overall insecurity of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and that results in a number of different pressures on gorillas, but also on communities. And that's also resulted in lawless activity occurring throughout the region, including artisanal mining, which is having grave effects on nature, on the forests and on people, the poisonings of waters, the extraction of materials, and Grauer's gorillas have suffered as a part of that.
What miners seek to the detriment of gorillas and other wildlife are so-called rare earth minerals used in electronic manufacturing. Keeping this mining out of Kahuzi-Biega and other DRC national parks has been difficult. The Wildlife Conservation Society says some 200 park rangers have been killed in the past 20 years. Via Skype, University of Sterling primate researcher Liz Williamson.
The rangers have not been able to operate in the parks for most of the last 2 decades, so it's now they need to be able to get back in because stability it's rocky, but it's coming back to Eastern DRC. The fact that it has been so unstable has allowed rebels to become established in these areas, and that's what needs to come under control.
The Congo Research Group at New York University says there are at least 70 armed groups operating in the eastern DRC, which has displaced about 1.6 million people. Major forces there include Rwanda's FDLR, the Ugandan ADF, and a wing of Burundi's FNL. Removing these armed units is a top priority if the region and its dwindling gorilla population are to be stabilized. That assertion via Skype from the WSC's Andre Plumtree in Kampala, Uganda.
Key thing we want the government to do is work on disarming these rebel groups and making sure that they are taken out of any of these protected areas. One of the options could be employing some of them to work on protecting these parks rather than have them getting involved in illegal activities.
Whether people are insurgents, miners, or just hungry locals, they need to eat. And that makes the large Grauer's gorilla an attractive target for poaching, despite DRC laws prohibiting these apes from being taken. WCS conservationist Joe Walston, whose NGO is pushing for Grauer's gorillas to be designated as critically endangered, says killing for meat is driving these apes and other wildlife to the brink.
Unsustainable extraction of bushmeat leads to collapses in populations of threatened species. And that is both a negative thing for, obviously, those species and conservation in general, but for the human population as well.
The NGO World Wildlife Fund's Boss Hubricks outlines his and other conservationist plan to help Grauer's gorillas survive.
First of all, disarming the miners that are illegally settled in those core areas. Secondly, by better training and equipping and motivating rangers to protect the last stronghold of the Grauers. Thirdly is to work more closely with communities that live near those Grauers to provide them with alternative livelihood opportunities so that they don't need to hunt those species for their survival. And lastly, to get illegal mining sites out of the areas where they are currently operating.
Hubricks and other conservationists say that without such action, the only gorillas people might see in the future could be in zoos such as this one in Washington, D.C.